There was a point in my life, and maybe you've been here too, where I genuinely believed I was one decision away from turning everything around. One decision, one big moment, one Monday morning where everything would just click. I told myself I'd start waking up at 6. I told myself I'd stop wasting evenings scrolling. I told myself this time would be different, because this time I actually meant it. And for a few days it was different. Then it wasn't. And the strange thing is, I didn't feel like a failure at first. I just quietly went back to the way things were, like water finding its level, like nothing had ever changed, because nothing really had. What no one tells you is that the problem wasn't willpower, it wasn't motivation, it wasn't even discipline. The problem was that I was trying to change my life by changing my actions, when the real thing that needed to change was something much quieter, much deeper, something most people never think to look at. This video is about that thing. Think about someone you know, maybe it's you, who has tried to get in shape more than once, who has downloaded the apps, bought the gear, started strong, and then gradually, without any single dramatic failure, just stopped. Or think about the person who wants to read more, who buys the books, stacks them on the nightstand, opens one, reads 3 pages, and then somehow finds themselves on their phone for the next 45 minutes. Or the one who keeps saying they're going to save money, who genuinely means it, who has the spreadsheet open in another tab. And yet, month after month, something always comes up. Something always takes priority. These are not lazy people. These are not stupid people. In most cases, these are people who work hard, who care about their lives, who want things to be better, but they keep running into the same invisible wall. And here's what makes it worse. They blame themselves. They say things like, "I just don't have the discipline," or "I'm not the type of person who can stick to things." They build a story about who they are based on repeated failures at things they actually wanted to do. That story becomes the wall. I've watched people spend years, literal years, stuck in this loop, working hard in bursts, burning out, starting over, getting the same results, telling themselves they need to try harder next time. And what I've come to understand is that trying harder is almost never the answer, because the system they're working inside of is broken, and you cannot out-effort a broken system. What this video is about is the system, the invisible one, the one that's been quietly running your life, whether you chose it or not. There's a story I think about a lot. Imagine 2 people who want to run a marathon. They both sign up on the same day. They both feel that same rush of excitement. They both set the same goal, 26.2 miles. Race day, finish line. The first person puts the goal on their wall. They talk about it. They think about it. Every morning they remind themselves of the goal. The second person does something different. They don't think much about the race. Instead, they lay out their running shoes by the door every night. They pick a route that takes them past a park they actually like. They find a podcast they only listen to while running. They make it slightly easier to go than to not go. 6 months later, one of them is running, the other is still thinking about running. What's the difference? They had the same goal, the same desire, the same starting point. The difference is that the second person stopped trying to win with motivation and started building a structure where the right behavior was just the natural thing that happened. Here's the insight that changes everything when you really let it land. Goals are about the results you want. Systems are about the process that produces those results. And the thing that actually determines your life is not the results you dream about. It's the daily process you actually live inside of. When you set a goal to lose 20 pounds, that goal doesn't do anything on Tuesday afternoon when you're tired and hungry, and the easiest thing to do is order pizza. What does something in that moment is the system, the fridge you stocked, the meal you prepped, the small choices you made before Tuesday afternoon arrived. Goals point direction, systems do work. And most of us have been spending all our energy on the goals, wondering why the work never gets done. Now here's where it gets interesting and a little uncomfortable. Think about someone who's trying to quit smoking. They've told their family, they've set a date, they're committed. 3 weeks in, someone offers them a cigarette at a party, and they take it. Just one. And then they feel terrible, not just physically, but about themselves, because in that moment they think they've failed at the goal. But there's another way to look at that moment, and a different way to look at every small choice you make. Every single action you take is a vote for a kind of person. Not the result, not the outcome, the identity. When you go for a walk, even a short one, you cast a vote for being someone who moves their body. When you write one paragraph, even a bad one, you cast a vote for being a writer. When you drink one glass of water in the morning instead of reaching straight for coffee, you cast a vote for being someone who takes care of themselves. Now, one vote doesn't win an election. Nobody becomes a runner from one jog. Nobody becomes a writer from one paragraph. But here's what does happen. Over time, the votes accumulate. And one day, you look at the pile of votes and you start to actually believe something different about yourself. And that belief, that quiet internal shift in how you see yourself, that's the real change. That's what makes the habits stick long term. Because you're not doing it anymore to reach a goal. You're doing it because it's who you are. Most people try to change their behaviors first and hope the identity follows. But what actually works is the opposite. You start building the identity slowly through small, repeated actions, and the behaviors become natural because they're consistent with who you've decided to be. So, the question worth asking yourself isn't, what do I want to achieve? The more powerful question is, who am I trying to become? And then, what's the smallest thing I can do today that someone like that would do? All right, let's get into the mechanics, because understanding how habits actually work in your brain gives you the ability to shape them, break them, and build them on purpose instead of by accident. Every habit, every single one, runs through 4 stages, always, without exception. There's a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. Let me give you a real example. You're sitting at your desk. You've been working for a while. You feel a little restless, a little foggy. That restless feeling is the cue. It triggers a craving, not necessarily for your phone specifically, but for some kind of stimulation, some kind of escape from the fog. The response is you picking up your phone. The reward is the brief hit of novelty, a new notification, a scroll, something different from what you were looking at. And the next time you feel that restlessness, your brain already knows the route. Cue, craving, response, reward. It gets faster, more automatic, until one day you're picking up your phone without even noticing you decided to. That's how all habits form, good and bad. Now, here's the useful part. Each of those 4 stages is a lever, a place where you can intervene and change the outcome. If you want to build a good habit, you make the cue obvious. You make the craving attractive. You make the response easy. You make the reward satisfying. If you want to break a bad habit, you do the reverse. You make the cue invisible. You make the craving unattractive. You make the response difficult. You make the reward unsatisfying. Simple in theory, but the power is in understanding which lever to pull. Take something most people struggle with, eating well. They try to solve it at the response stage. They try to use willpower in the moment when the craving hits. That's the hardest stage to intervene at. It's the stage where your brain is already activated, already wanting. But if you intervene at the cue stage, if the junk food simply isn't in your house, there's no craving to fight. The game is already won. You didn't need willpower, you needed design. This idea, designing your environment before the moment of decision, is one of the most underrated ideas I've ever come across. Because we like to think we make choices, but mostly we respond to our surroundings. Put the fruit on the counter, not the cookies. Put your gym bag by the door, not in the closet. Put your phone in the other room before bed, not on the nightstand. You're not using discipline in those moments. You're building a world where discipline is barely necessary. Here's something that sounds almost too simple, and that's exactly why most people ignore it. When you want to build a new habit, Start with something that takes 2 minutes or less. Not 20 minutes, not a meaningful effort. 2 minutes. You want to read more? Your habit is open the book. That's it. Open it, read 1 page, and you're done for the day if you want to be. You want to meditate? Sit down and take 3 conscious breaths. Done. You want to work out? Put on your gym clothes. Now, this feels ridiculous. It feels like it can't possibly make a difference, and I understand that reaction. I had it too. But here's what's actually happening when you do this. You're solving the hardest problem in habit formation: starting. Starting is where most habits die, not in the middle, not at the end, at the beginning. Because the beginning requires activation energy, the energy to transition from one state to another. And most of the time, we dramatically overestimate how much activation energy we have available at any given moment. If you make starting so easy that it costs almost nothing, you remove that barrier almost entirely. And then something interesting happens. You start. And once you've started, continuing feels natural. The person who opened the book almost always reads more than 1 page. The person who put on the gym clothes almost always goes for the walk, not because they forced themselves, but because starting created its own momentum. There's a concept here worth naming: standardize before you optimize. The goal at first isn't to have a great workout. The goal is to become someone who works out. The goal isn't to write a brilliant page. The goal is to become someone who writes. You can't optimize something that doesn't exist yet. First, make the habit real. Make it small enough that it actually happens. And then, over time, you let it grow. The 2-minute version isn't the destination, it's the gateway. Let's talk about something that most productivity advice never mentions. The assumption most people carry is that if something is good for you, it should feel a little difficult, a little uncomfortable. And if it feels too easy or too enjoyable, maybe it doesn't count. That assumption is wrong, and it's quietly sabotaging a lot of people. Here's a different way to think about it. There's a student, let's call him David, who needed to do a lot of research reading for school. Dry, dense material, the kind of thing you can stare at for 20 minutes without retaining a word. He dreaded it. But David had one thing he looked forward to every day: a specific podcast he loved. He made a rule for himself. He could only listen to that podcast while he was doing his reading. Not before, not after, only during. Within a week, he was actually looking forward to research time. That's temptation bundling. You link a habit you need to do with something you actually want to do. You pair the thing that feels like work with something that feels like reward, and your brain starts associating the behavior you're trying to build with the feeling of something enjoyable. This works because habits are ultimately driven by anticipated rewards. Your brain isn't thinking about the distant future benefit of eating well or exercising. It's thinking about right now. What does this feel like right now? What's the immediate return? If you can make the immediate experience of a good habit slightly more pleasurable, not by lying to yourself, but by genuinely engineering some enjoyment into it, you make the habit more likely to stick. Only listen to your favorite music while cleaning the house. Only watch the show you love while you're on the treadmill. Only let yourself get a really good coffee after you've finished the morning task you keep avoiding. This isn't a trick. It's a recognition of how motivation actually works in the human brain. You work with it instead of constantly against it. This one matters a lot because I think it's the reason most people quit right before something real would have happened. Imagine you're holding an ice cube in your hand. The room is cold, 25 degrees, and you start slowly turning up the heat. 26 degrees, nothing happens. 27, nothing. 28, 29, 30, still nothing. The ice just sits there. The effort is happening, but there's no visible result. And then you hit 32 degrees, and the ice begins to melt. Was the work between 25 and 31 wasted? Of course not. Every degree mattered. Every unit of heat was building toward the threshold. The result didn't show up until 32, but the cause started long before. This is exactly how habit change works,
and it's why people quit. You start going to the gym. 3 weeks in, you look in the mirror and you see nothing. You start meditating. A month in, you don't feel like a calmer person yet. You start writing. 6 weeks in, you still don't feel like a writer. And so you stop, because it doesn't feel like it's working. But the work was accumulating. The change was happening below the surface. You just hadn't hit the threshold yet. James Clear calls this the plateau of latent potential, that gap between the work you're doing and the results you can see. And the tragedy is that most people live their entire lives inside that gap, quitting just before the ice would have melted. The ones who change, the ones who genuinely transform their habits and their lives, they aren't necessarily working harder. They're just trusting the process long enough to cross the threshold. And the way you trust the process when results aren't visible yet is by shifting your focus. Not, am I getting results yet, but am I maintaining the system? Not, do I look different yet, but did I show up today? Because showing up is the vote. The result is just the count at the end. I want to spend some time on this one because I think it carries a kind of quiet compassion that most self-improvement advice is missing. Most of the time, when we fail at a habit, we blame ourselves, our character, our discipline, our commitment. But here's something that decades of behavioral science has shown very clearly. People's behavior changes dramatically depending on the environment they're in, not because they become different people, because the environment is quietly running the show. A person who eats badly at home often eats much better in a new city, where they don't know where the fast food is. A person who scrolls endlessly on their phone often reads for hours on a flight where they don't have signal. The same person, completely different behavior, because the environment changed. This means something important. The version of yourself that you wish you were, the one who reads more, moves more, eats better, spends more intentionally, that person isn't buried under laziness or weakness. That person emerges naturally in the right environment. So the work isn't self-criticism. The work is environment design. When I hear people say, I just need more discipline, I want to ask them, what does your home look like? What does your desk look like? What's on your phone screen and what apps are 2 taps away versus buried in a folder? What do you see when you walk into your kitchen? Your behavior is shaped by what's visible, accessible, and easy in your surroundings. Before you try to change your choices, change your surroundings. Put the book on the pillow. Delete the apps that pull you away. Move the fruit forward in the fridge. Put the weights next to the TV. Use context to work for you instead of against you. And on the other side, context can anchor bad habits too. The person who smokes while drinking might not crave cigarettes at other times. The person who eats junk food in front of the TV might not have the same impulse sitting at a table. The cue and the location are intertwined. This is why one of the most effective strategies for building new habits is to use new spaces or to assign specific spaces to specific behaviors. Work happens at the desk, relaxation happens on the couch, reading happens in the chair by the window. When spaces have clear purposes, your brain starts sliding into the right mode automatically when you enter them. You are not undisciplined. You are a human being responding to your environment like all human beings do. Start there. Here's the thing that most people don't realize, and it genuinely shifts something when you do. Your habits are not just producing results, they are producing you. Every single day that you repeat a behavior, you are reinforcing a pattern in your brain, a neural pathway that gets slightly more established, a story about who you are that gets slightly more solid. And this works in both directions. Every day you scroll for 2 hours instead of reading, you are not just missing 2 hours of reading. You are casting a vote for being someone who doesn't read. You are reinforcing the identity of someone who kills time rather than builds something. Every day you skip the exercise you meant to do. You are not just missing a workout. You are quietly confirming to yourself that you're someone who doesn't follow through. That story compounds.
Over 1 year, the gap between a person who improves 1% every day and a person who declines 1% every day is enormous. At 1% better every day for a year, you end up 37 times better than where you started. At 1% worse every day for a year, you decline to nearly nothing. That math is staggering, and it doesn't apply to fitness or productivity in some abstract way. It applies to your confidence, your relationships, your sense of what's possible for you. The small choices compound in both directions, always. And most of us don't feel the compounding happening. We feel fine today, we feel fine next week. The damage, or the growth, is invisible in the short term. It only becomes visible years later. And by then, people often look at where they are and wonder how they got there, how they drifted so far from what they wanted. They drifted one Tuesday at a time. What most people also don't realize is this: there is no neutral. Every habit you maintain is either building something or eroding something. Every environment you live inside is either making good behavior easier or harder. Every identity you reinforce is either expanding what you think is possible for yourself or shrinking it. There is no standing still. Which is both a little heavy and also quietly freeing, because it means that any day, including today, is a day where you can start accumulating something different. Okay, let's get grounded. I want to be clear. I'm not going to tell you to overhaul your life. I'm not going to say you need a morning routine with 7 steps. I'm not going to pretend that awareness of these ideas automatically translates into change. What I want to do is share a few concrete shifts in how you can think and act that don't require massive effort, but that actually align with how habit change works. The first is this: stop starting too big. Whatever habit you want to build, find a version of it so small that missing it would feel almost silly. Not 20 minutes of meditation, 3 breaths. Not a full workout, 5 minutes of movement. Not a chapter, 2 pages. Small enough that your brain doesn't negotiate with you about it. Small enough that there's no version of yourself too tired to do it. Do that for 2 weeks, just that, and watch what happens. The second shift: look at your environment before you look at your motivation. If there's something you keep failing at, before you beat yourself up, ask a different question. What in my environment is making this harder? What would make the right choice the easier choice? Change something physical before you try harder emotionally. Put something away. Move something visible. Remove a step from the bad habit and add a step to it if you need to slow it down. The third shift: track in a way that measures showing up, not performance. Get a simple calendar, mark off every day that you did the behavior you're trying to build, even if it was the tiny version, even if it was 2 minutes, mark it. Your goal is not to break the chain, not because of pressure, but because watching a chain grow creates its own quiet satisfaction. And when you miss a day, because you will, the rule is never miss twice. 1 missed day is an accident. 2 missed days is the beginning of a new habit. The fourth shift: get honest about your identity. This one is the deepest and sometimes the most uncomfortable. Sit quietly and ask yourself, what kind of person am I trying to become? Not what do I want to have or achieve, who am I trying to be? Write it down if you need to, and then look at your daily choices through that lens. Not, should I work out today, but is this the kind of choice someone like the person I'm trying to become would make? It changes the frame. It makes each small choice feel connected to something larger, and that connection between daily action and personal identity is what makes habits finally stick when nothing else has. And the fifth thing, and maybe the most practical of all, design for your worst days, not your best days. Most people build habits that require them to be at their best, rested, motivated, not stressed, and then on a hard day, the whole system falls apart because they designed for a version of themselves that isn't always available. Design for a day when you're tired. Design for a day when you're sad. Design for a day when something went wrong at work and you're running 20 minutes late. On that day,
What is the minimum version of your habit that you can still do? Define that version. Commit to it. Because doing something small on your worst day is worth more in terms of identity reinforcement than doing something great on your best day. The goal is always consistency over intensity.
We started this conversation with a feeling, the feeling of being one decision away from change, of genuinely wanting things to be different, but somehow always ending up back where you started. I hope what this has given you is a different way of looking at that loop. Not as a failure of willpower, not as evidence of some personal deficit, but as a systems problem with real, workable solutions. The ideas here aren't complicated. They don't require you to be someone you're not. They require you to look honestly at how you're built, how habits are built, and how change actually happens in the long, quiet reality of daily life, as opposed to the loud, exciting burst of a new resolution. The truth is that your life at any given moment is largely the sum of your habits, not your intelligence, not your potential, not your circumstances, though those matter too, mostly your habits, the things you do without much thinking, the patterns you've accidentally built or consciously chosen. And the hopeful part of that truth is this: habits can change. Not overnight, not dramatically, not through some peak of motivation that lasts 3 days, but slowly, practically, and permanently, if you build the right systems and give them enough time. You don't have to be a different person tomorrow. You just have to cast a slightly different vote today, and then again tomorrow. That's it. That's really the whole thing.